Okay, where do I start? I am a schizoid, amongst quite a few people out there that probably are the same, and am considered non-neurotypical, as I was told by my psychiatrist and therapist and anyone else I've seen over the years or read regarding. And there are a lot of people on this earth that are not neurotypical, and unfortunately, we have very few outlets to rant, rave, express our anger, our frustration with the world that we inhabit, because usually that's reserved for a therapy room or, you know, laying on a couch, speaking to whoever it is you're paying or your insurance is paying to listen to you, to satiate you with your ramblings so that you don't end up doing anything crazy or anything disastrous to yourself or others, which, is a noble endeavor on its own accord, but also comes with its own problems. Part of the issue is that many of us feel trapped within this framework that we did not create, that we did not shape, we did not form. We feel alien in a world that doesn't make sense half the time for a variety of reasons, depending on what your non-neurotypical behavior or cognitive issues may be, what wires aren't firing, or which ones connect that don't connect, or which ones reconnect that once didn't connect and disconnect again. And all those frustrations that come with living in a world that just doesn't make any sense half the time, but we have to make sense of it or accept that it just doesn't make any goddamn sense and we just have to live in it, or the other option is to, well, not live in it. So that's just a little introduction to that. To whoever's listening, I don't know what behavioral problem you may suffer with, disorder, as they like to term it. In fact, if in fact you do, if you don't, if you are neurotypical and listening to this, well then that's fun. Maybe it'll give you a little insight into why so many of us are so angry and frustrated, and angst filled, and depressed and anxious, and so on and so forth. Uh, I myself am mostly just angry, very, very furious, and with very little direction in which to point this particular rage. But, you know, I guess this could be therapeutic in its own way, producing this audio and having some way of letting it out. So I'm mostly just going to be rambling. I may on occasion get angry. That's all this is. If you like listening to that, good for you. If you don't, fuck off. I don't care. So, one thing I want to go over, I guess, in this first upload is that being schizoid is all I really know about. I have some ADD. I was diagnosed with that early on in life, but the schizoid diagnosis did not occur until much later. And so, as you can imagine, that caused quite a few problems over the years. Schizoid is often misunderstood. It's either thought of as so close to schizophrenic that we're just on some cusp of going over the edge. That is not the case. It's completely different. We are also not schizotypical. That would be closer to any kind of precursor to schizophrenia. Schizoid is a bit different. It's very complicated in that there isn't a lot of outward signs um, that most people would pick up on because we tend to have pretty calm demeanors and don't outwardly express much. And it's honestly, it's only by being around us quite a bit that people start realizing there's something different going on here. But an explanation. So a lot of the misinformation is that we are without feelings, that we are dead inside, which I am, but for different reasons than merely my cognitive functions or lack thereof sometimes. And we are emotional, we just don't express it, and it's at much lower degrees than the neurotypical individual. We tend to want to be by ourselves, that is true, but we can become very lonely. Um, so generally, we possess a few limited social interactions that we enjoy, a few friends that we're close to. Once we, if we manage to, not most of us don't get to that point. I mean, I'm not a young man anymore, but it took many years to establish any kind of emotional connection to other human beings. But those I did develop are strong. Uh, of course, my ability to express such things can be stunted at times. But nonetheless, they exist. I care. I love. That is a misunderstanding about the schizoid. We just tend not to have very many friends as we do not usually like being around people. And even the people we do care about, we like a certain amount of limited interaction. The only individuals that we generally don't mind extended interaction with are, say, in the case of myself, a spouse or children or child, offspring. Outside of that, regardless of, how much we may or may not like someone, it's usually pretty limited how much social interaction we actually want at any given time. It fluctuates tremendously. It's quite volatile, at least in my case. Um, so no, we are not cold monsters. We just seem that way because we rarely express our inner emotions due to most of us feeling rather uncomfortable or anxious when dealing with them or when approached with them. So, whether it's our emotions bubbling inside of us, which many of us, I assume, do not enjoy, or um, just the lack of emotional bubbling that can be also frustrating, especially when emotion can be particularly useful, especially when interacting with other people. So, one thing that commonly occurs is we become very good at masking, hiding who we actually are or what we lack. So, we create personas that others can interact with, usually one, multiple, depending on, I guess, workplace environments or school. Friendly demeanors, jokey demeanors. Some of us do it for so long that we forget that those personalities aren't even ours, but they're useful. They have their function. They get us through the day. They achieve goals that we are working toward, and um, make social interactions less awkward and less frustrating if they think we're just one of them. So essentially, we feel like pod people half the time. We have way too much inner monologue. I remember a few years ago, like a year or two ago, they kept talking about what NPCs, human NPCs, and all that kind of stuff. Now, from what I've read and what I've seen, we have a lot of inner monologue, lots of it, mostly, mostly inner monologue. So we're very introverted, both socially and just cognitively. Um, we tend to be in our heads a lot of the time, and we prefer it that way. If I can speak for anyone else that's listening or that is schizoid, I'm guessing you would agree. Um, Maybe not. That's fine. I don't care. I'm just kind of explaining what I've read and what I've seen and what I've experienced and so on and so forth. It's a bit anecdotal, but who cares? This is meant for me to just ramble. Um, what's interesting as well is when developing social relationships or intimate relationships, which are rare to begin with, they tend to fizzle or have problems because we usually lack the tools to express any kind of empathy or sympathy, especially sympathy. Sympathy, I have none. Empathy, I can possess, but that's why it requires me to understand the situation and actually empathize with it because it's a situation that I can find myself in. Um, that's why I empathize the most with situations in which the people involved have no control over what happened, so they could not have avoided whatever disastrous occurrence it was, because I personally would not like to be in that situation, whatever it is, something beyond one's control. So I can understand when someone is suffering. I just don't really do so if it's something that I personally feel I could have avoided or not put myself in. At that point, it becomes very difficult for me to care at all. Um, even when I care about someone or something that isn't, in my immediate, um, very close knit group or small close knit group, um, I will help. I will do what I can to remedy a situation, but it does not mean I am emotionally attached or connected to the situation itself. So once the event takes place and I do what I ethically believe is the right move, I do the thing and I move on, and I no longer need to interact with any individuals associated with that event. So I'm more interested in the event itself than the people involved. That's usually the situation with many of us schizoids, from what I can tell, is we are into things, events, places, concepts, abstract or otherwise, not people. People are aggravating, frustrating, um, often emotional. And of course, for us, that just doesn't really work out too great. It's very draining. Feels like everyone around you is what they term a energy vampire. All humans around you that are willing to or wanting to interact with you for whatever the reason it may be, whether it's negative or positive interactions, they can be very draining, especially if they're very expressive, like say hugging and intimate conversations about their lives and things like that. Depending on the level or the extremeness of their action, it can be more or less draining and exhausting and frustrating. It can cause a lot of angst and frustration. Well, I mean, I already said the anger and frustration's in the angst, so that's a bit redundant, but you know what I mean. So that's how that functions. Outside of that, um, let me tell you why I'm angry. I'm angry because I need to live in a fucking world that was already there that caters to individuals that are nothing like myself. Now, I understand that it is not their fault because, well, there's more of them, so thus it stands that they would create a world in which their types would function within, or that would, you know, um, cater to the demographic aggregate of the neurotypical or even the non-schizoid, but nonetheless, it is difficult because as someone that is schizoid or otherwise, and I'm sure if you suffer from any other behavioral, cognitive, whatever you want to call it, whether it's Asperger's or, um, you know, it doesn't matter. Whatever issues you may deal with neurologically or otherwise, psychologically or psychiatric issues you may have, you are alien in this world. You live in it, and you don't know why you have to. And you don't know why you have to follow their rules, live by their ways. But you know you must in order to function or to exist. But that nonetheless never becomes easy. it always becomes incredibly frustrating, especially as a schizoid, because we don't like to generally make decisions based on our emotional or a emotional reasoning for it. Like, we tend to like to work with numbers and information, data, ideas and concepts that are well structured, um, things that follow a certain logical step by step process. We like that because that makes sense to someone like myself. When people get angry or frustrated or attach themselves to some form of defense mechanism associated to their identity or lived experience or whatever you want to term it, those things do not work for me. They're fucking annoying. And I can't work with that. But unfortunately, I have no choice. And so I have to find workarounds in order to somehow manage such interactions. And more so, the anger has not subsided. It's grown because as much as we like to be alone, the world doesn't want to leave us alone. There is more and more in my face all the time, whether it's television, internet, video games, literature, academia, politics, hell, archaeology, psychology, a variety of topics. All of them have been very, very injected by a strange, foreign, emotional landscape. And it used to be that those things would be a nice vacation from having to deal with this neurotypical framework of a world. Because, as I noted, it is difficult enough to deal with normal social interactions, local, but when the world itself seems to be burning and losing its mind over the last decade or so, furthermore, it becomes that much more difficult to ignore it and move on and focus on the self and the few that you care about, because you see the connections, you know how it's going to start affecting your life and the way you enjoy existing, because they're making it so that you have no choice but to live and change with whatever framework they're trying to design now. Their structures or the neurotypical world often changes and fluctuates with trends, um, with politics, with cultural taboos that also change from generation to generation, and more so still from decade to decade or year to year. It keeps altering itself at tremendous levels that are difficult to keep up with. And as you see these changes occur, especially, like I said, over the last decade, it's very frustrating because the decisions don't seem to be made with any logical consistency. They jump from one thing to another. Contradictions. It's a cacophony of contradictions everywhere. And we are told that we must merely listen to them, understand them, and somehow respect them. To me, that seems like madness, complete insanity. Yet I am the non-neurotypical. I am the insane one. It doesn't feel that way. I've seen a lot of people, mention that the world seems to have been taken over by the patients. The asylum that is the world has been taken over by the patients. I honestly feel that way. And I don't think so much that the patients took over as in the world around them changed so much that the patients now make more sense than the guards ever did. Now, in 2020, we are required to wear masks everywhere we go, regardless of any issues anyone may have with the validity of doing so. We must not say certain words, not exhibit certain behaviors, not express certain ideas and concepts, regardless, again, of the validity, objectively, of those concerns or ideas or concepts. There is no discussion to be had. And much of the decision for these things is highly, highly emotionally driven, thus making it more frustrating for individuals like myself that don't function in such a manner. Other people, neurotypical individuals, either don't care about these changes as it doesn't affect their everyday life in any way they find to be significant, or if it does, they are unwilling to say anything because of the fear of ostracization or just the awkwardness of the social interactions that would occur were you to say anything negative about the current situation. That's fucking annoying. And we have to live with it on a daily basis. Now, you would think that something such as social distancing would be beneficial to someone like myself who would prefer social distancing to begin with, because I don't want anyone near me. But unfortunately, because I live in a world in which the neurotypicals rule, I know this is negatively impacting them. And problems come with that, as their behaviors change into more erratic behaviors that are driven by fear, confusion. But I think I'll talk more about that in a different upload. I have some very strong thoughts pertaining to that I don't think I've heard anyone talk about. Another thing that's important is I think we need a perspective from, I guess, one of the retards like myself, the stunted, emotionally stunted, retarded individuals like myself, the autistic, the whatever it is that we are. Because I think in a productive way I can talk about certain subjects while the listener can know that I am not being dragged into any emotional arguments pertaining to why it is that something is not good or good. Um, I steer clear from those type of arguments. I've only used them generally when the other person is using them, and it seems that's the only way you can communicate with them in order to kind of rationalize the situation for them. Sometimes you have to use emotional arguments. It's fucking irritating, but otherwise you get stuck in these almost like perpetually circling sort of logic that they start constructing for themselves, and then you're just in a weird loop that never goes anywhere. But that's something else. Ugh, who cares? I guess the point of this channel is going to be to hear from people who are non-neurotypical, that have similar frustrations, and wish to express them. I do not want to be your friend. I do not want to get on Discord and start having buddy conversations. I just want your opinion, and I want you to express that you deal with a similar angst of, living within this framework that you have no choice to live in because, oh well, that's the dice you got rolled. So it's fun, right? Cognitive framework that everyone else seems to just be floating through, and you have to push through it like it's fucking mud every fucking day. So, if you have ideas or subjects that you'd like to hear about, or you would just like to comment on your own experiences, do so, please. It may trigger another rant inside my mind, another conversation with the self that will give me some fuel for this fire. Right now, I'm not even particularly angry, it's just more frustrated with everything around me. And because I didn't see any good videos with individuals that are schizoid themselves, or, deal with whatever other um, behavioral personality disorders, whatever. Um, I didn't see any channels where they just discuss how it is that they function in this world, and it isn't some kind of self-help or optimistic perspective. It's more of I needed something out there where it's being more realist to the suffering and anger and anguish that comes with this awesome existence. Regardless of what country you live in, you still have to suffer under the frameworks already made before your birth, whatever problems you were drug into. And I'm sure anyone born into this world feels the same to some respect, but it is a unique experience when your own way of thinking is unable to fall in line in any significant way with what is thought to be um, conventional belief, thought, way of thinking, just anything. When your personality, when your values just do not fall in line because of no fault of your own, generally, because of your wiring, your perception of the world due to chemical reasons or due to some synapses not quite firing like they should, or too many synapses firing in directions that other people's do not generally. So post anything. I don't care. Just want some thoughts so that I can keep going. I'm angry with you, is what I'm saying. I'm frustrated with you. Let's discuss it. See what we can do here. Probably nothing, because I'm as black-pilled as it fucking gets, but I'd like to hear opinions from those that are not quite as black-pilled as myself, so that we can figure out some solutions to how we can live, at least with a moderate level of comfort in this uncomfortable, and that's the understatement of a lifetime, world of emotional baggage, illogical decision, irrational behavior, selfishness, not even capable of reciprocal altruism. I am a strong advocate of reciprocal altruism. It benefits everyone. It's parasitic in its own way, but it benefits every individual to a moderate degree. But unfortunately, That is not what we have to work with. We have a big pile of shit to work with that we're trying to shape into something semi-functional. In any case, please comment and subscribe.